All right, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, welcome to this midterm election by the numbers. It's a special broadcast, and I want to bring in, he's an author, he's a historian. His name is Larry Schweikart, and he joins us now via the phone. Larry, welcome to Conduit News Radio.
No, thank you. Glad to be here.
I have been following you on Twitter for a while about the early voting numbers, and I find them fascinating, number one, because you don't see this talked about anywhere else in the mainstream media, and yet you're out there essentially saying, and you've been saying since July, that you think that the Republicans will hold the House and make gains in the Senate. Tell us about that.
Well, let's understand what early voting numbers are compared to polls. A poll is a sample that pre-decided by some pollster as to who he's going to talk to, of opinions of people about what they may do at some future point. That's like 3 levels of tangentiality, okay? A vote, absentee or early, is a record of what people have already done in the past that you can count. Now, you say, well, you can't count who they voted for. That's correct. But you can, in many states, certainly not all, and this will be an issue in a couple of states, but you can count in many states whether they're Republican or Democrat ballots. And based on that and the kind of running assumption by almost everybody in the industry that party identifier is the single biggest factor indicating how somebody's going to vote, you can pretty well assume the same percentage of Democrats and Republicans who turn in ballots are going to vote for Democrats and Republicans. So you can arrive at a pretty solid number of who's voting and for whom. You say, well, we don't know how indies are voting. That's correct, and I never include indies in my analysis because figuring them out is one of the keys of polling, and so far none of the pollsters have really done it very well. So just looking at the Republican and Democrat ballots at places like Florida, Arizona, Nevada, we can get a pretty good idea of where the election is headed. So let's just take Arizona. In Arizona, so far, we have over 116,000 Republican ballots over Democrat ballots. That is, Republicans have 116,000 lead. By Election Day in Arizona, 80% of all voters will have voted. Let that number sink in. 80% of voters in Arizona will have voted before the election. And so when you go into the election with a lead of 116,000, there just are not enough independents out there to flip a race. Richard Barris, the pollster, estimated that it would take independents breaking for Kristen Sinema somewhere over 72% to flip the race. So I think the race in Arizona is already over, and I think Nick Sally has already won.
Wow.
In a place like Florida, for example, Democrats came out of early voting with a 28,000 lead. Ooh, people, oh my gosh, they have a lead. Well, yeah, but in 2016, they had a lead of almost 100,000 coming out of early voting, meaning that they are way about 60,000 votes behind where they were in 2016 when Trump carried the state by 113,000 votes. So that gives you some idea of where you think the final vote will end up. I think it'll end up with the Republicans about 150 to 200,000 votes ahead.
So where does it stand right now? I understand that did the Democrats take the early vote lead?
Yes.
Basically in Florida.
They always do.
Right.
They always come back. Republicans lead in what's called mail-in, vote by mail, or absentee voting. And then the Democrats come back, and in the final 2 weekends, they do what's called souls to the polls, where they get all the churchgoers in black neighborhoods to go vote after church. And they always take the lead, but the point is they usually have a huge lead after this, and this time they have a very small lead.
And so then the question really is, I mean, if everything holds the way it normally does, Republicans in Florida, they typically outperform the Democrats on Election Day, correct?
That's correct. Same in Ohio, same in Arizona.
Wow. So we could be looking at a repeat of 2016 all over again.
No, I think so, without question. I mean, I think I've had the Republicans pegged as winning between 4 and 7 net Senate seat gains since early summer, and the only thing that's changed, in my opinion, is maybe we need to up that by 1 or 2. It now appears that Huggy Bear Hugan up in New Jersey is going to come away with a victory. It's going to be real close, but he's up now.
Wow.
At least that's what I'm hearing. Same thing. I'm not going to say the other one. There's another Senate race out there that the Republican is actually ahead that no one has caught yet. So, I think it'd be very easy to see Republicans gain a net 6 to 8 Senate seats.
I was reading your thread. By the way, we're talking, folks, with Larry Schweikart. He is the author of a great book that I've had for a long time, A Patriot's History of the United States. Many of you know it's that big, thick blue book that many of you out there have, and it's a New York Times, #1 bestseller. And so I really appreciate you spending time with us this morning, Larry, and we're going to re-air this interview tomorrow morning on our terrestrial stations. I was reading your thread on Twitter, and it talked about how we should know kind of the way things are going to go tomorrow night or Tuesday night based on some of these East Coast races. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, basically, you can tell how things are going by how early the liberal media will try to pump out Democrat victories. For example, if Kemp lost the governor's race in Georgia, or it appeared he was going to lose that, they would call that race with 0.1% counted. I mean, they would literally call it that quickly. So if you're going past 1 or 2 hours past when the polls close, you can probably assume in whatever race it is that the Republican is winning. Doesn't always work out. We saw in Virginia, for example, in 2016, that went way down to the wire, and Trump was ahead right until the last minute when a lot of the Northern Virginia counties came in. But for the most part, if, for example, they haven't called the House races for the Democrat in Florida 26, Florida 27, Virginia 10, all of the New York districts, all of the New Jersey districts, and all the Pennsylvania districts. I mean, literally, the Democrats have to win almost all of those to win the House. Now, if they haven't called almost all of those, you can be assured it's going to be a long night and that probably the Democrats are going to lose the House because as you get further west, except for California, there aren't too many seats for them to get.
Yeah.
California, however, is looking very good in the early and absentee voting. Once again, the Republicans are outperforming where they need to be with 2 exceptions. And I said we could lose 2 seats in California. I think the max will lose is 1.
Really? So you think all of this hype, with the mainstream media saying, California is going to be the, maybe the apex of the blue wave. You don't see it happening that way.
No, all of the early voting and absentee we're seeing from all of the contested races out there, Republicans are leading all of them. The only question is, are they leading by enough to sustain, for example, a major turn by independents? And they are leading by more than enough in all but 2 of the races. And in those 2, the candidates have a pretty good record of flipping independents. So I don't think California's an issue. One other thing to think about in California is that for a change, they have a contested governor's race. John Cox out there probably won't win, but he is sending a lot of people to the polls and a lot of Republicans who would not otherwise vote because, what's the use, are going to show up to vote for Cox, and in the process they will vote for other Republicans down ticket.
We're talking again with Larry Schweikart. He is the author of the book, several books, but Patriot's History of the United States, and there's the modern-day version as well. On your thread this morning, Larry, it talked about how you had a note from a friend about how there's not much talk of the election among the youths, if you will, the youth on social media. Now, the millennials were supposed to be a big part of this supposed blue wave. What are you hearing?
Yeah, this is a friend who's plugged in to that generation, and he pays a great deal of attention to social media. And he said, what struck me is that there's no discussion of this election on social media at all among these people, indicating that there's not a lot of excitement there. And that's showing up in the early vote numbers. Again, we're not seeing big turnout by the Utes, to quote my cousin Vinny. They just aren't turning out in any large numbers, and so that pretty well bodes well for Republicans. Here's one little stat that'll shock you. In Arizona, early voting, the average age was 60.
Wow. Well, those are going to be tend to be more conservative voters, you would think. Of course.
You would think.
Yeah. Man, this is just fascinating stuff. So let me ask you this, Larry, and I've been following again your tweets for a while. These early voting numbers, you're not getting this. This is really alternative news. I mean, it really is to the fake news media. But one of the things that I've been saying for a while is the reason the left has seen red since 2016 is because of the mainstream media lying to them, telling them that Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in for 18 months, and then when that didn't happen, their little security blanket fell apart, and they've done nothing but just really go more and more radical on us. And looks like we may be – now, I know we don't know what's going to happen, but it looks like, if the Republicans hold the House and then they make gains in the Senate, I kind of feel like it's a signal of more unrest, not less, at least from the left's point of view. I think they're going to surprise us with how radical they'll become. What do you think?
Well, that's a very distinct possibility. There's obviously two ways they can go. They can reassess and go, gee, maybe this crazy message is not selling to ordinary Americans. Maybe we need to reassess. That's what Bill Clinton did with the Democrat study group in the 1980s after their huge loss to the caucus. They said, we need to reconnect with middle America. And, of course, Clinton did that very, very well. Will they do that? The likelihood is probably not. But again, we'll have to wait and see if the adults in that party take charge of it or not.
As a historian, have you ever seen the country at the place that it's in, or can you observe a portion of our past where we're so divided?
Well, you mean besides 1861?
Yeah, besides the Civil War, Larry.
People ask this all the time. You do realize that at one point in the country, 13 states were so disturbed about an election that they literally left the Union and raised armies.
Wow. So we seem to be, and that's kind of bone chilling. That should chill everybody out there. We have this caravan. We have
can I speak to that for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
I was talking with pollster Richard Barris, who was the most accurate pollster in 2016. He got Hillary's number right, but he also had Trump winning the electoral vote, the only one to do that. And he was saying in his polling of various California and other Arizona and other races that about 2 weeks ago the Democrats were ahead in the independents. Now, that didn't mean they were winning the races because in some cases, like I said with Sinema, they'd have to be ahead a lot. But it did mean that they were ahead with the independents. And then he said once this caravan came to the fore, it shifted dramatically, especially among suburban women who were terrified of seeing the images that they saw and suddenly began to see, these invaders kind of pillaging through the streets like the barbarians of old, and that began to shift the polling, he said, quite dramatically.
Wow. I think you're right. I think there was a twofold. I think Kavanaugh mobilized what happened with the Kavanaugh hearings. It mobilized the right, and then the caravan. Immigration is the GOP issue, and
yes,
it is a real thing. And the media actually told us that the caravan was real when they thought it was going to hurt Trump, and now that they know it's helping get out the base, now that it's a myth, it's a phantom, it's not real, even though it's getting bigger every day.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem for them to contend with. If the Republicans hold, they are going to have a challenge next year, and that is they're going to have to do something serious on two fronts. One is immigration, and the other is going to be health care. There can be no more John McCain thumbs down things. They're going to have to fix that. Mm-hmm. And I think they will, and they can. You have to understand that if this goes as I suggested it will, not only will you have a net 6 to 8 more Republican senators, but the majority of those, if you leave outside somebody like Mitt Romney, the majority of those are Trumpers. They've run on the Trump program. They get support from Trump. And so as a result, I don't think you'll ever see another thumbs down moment or another moment where we have a Supreme Court justice depending on a senator from Maine.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. I know we're running out of time, Larry, and I appreciate your time. We're talking with Larry Schweikart, New York Times #1 best-selling author. You can follow him on Twitter at Larry Schweikart. Great stuff, great information you're not hearing anywhere else. When President Trump does say that the fake news media is the enemy of the American people, do you agree with him?
I do, and we've seen this before. Say when has this occurred before? Well, in the Jacksonian era, people don't understand that newspapers were never created to distribute news. The origin of newspapers was as an organ of the Democratic Party to distribute propaganda about the Democrat Party. And later, the Whigs and then the Republicans figured, oh, yeah, they're doing this, we better do it too. So before the Civil War, fully 85%, according to one newspaper historian, 85% of all newspapers were nothing more than propaganda rags. And so, what's happened today is that they are totally taking the position and the issues of our enemies, whether it's Iran or ISIS or whoever else. They are standing up for everybody who hates and despises America. And I think that a large portion of the American people are getting sick of that.
I absolutely agree with you, Larry. And it's really great to meet your acquaintance. I appreciate you agreeing to do this interview and giving us a completely different take of what people are hearing day in, day out from the media, that it's a shoo-in that the Democrats are going to take the House. I think you've certainly called that into legitimate doubt here today, and I agree with you. I think the Republicans are going to hold the House based on your reporting and your numbers, and I really appreciate you coming on the program.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
All righty. Larry Schweikart, everybody. Folks, that's all the time for this special election mashup, midterm election by the numbers broadcast. We really appreciate you listening. Without you, we couldn't build this Liberty machine that we're attempting to build. We're going to re-air this particular interview tomorrow morning for our terrestrial radio broadcast, Conduit News Radio. But for the rest of you, if you want to share this interview with your friends, you want to go to his Twitter, Larry Schweikart's Twitter, you want to buy his book, Patriots History of the United States. It's that big blue book that everybody has, or a lot of people have. You need to have it because it's a really good read, The Forgotten History or The Real History of the United States. But share this with your friends, and also, most importantly, tell them that they have to get out and vote. They have to call their friends to vote. They have to call folks who are outside of this state. Now, maybe if you have some friends who are in Florida, or family who are in Florida, or Texas, or California, or some of these East Coast districts that he was mentioning, and you listen to what he said. He said if they don't call some of these districts immediately for the Democrats, then you know it's going well for the Republicans early on when those polls close tomorrow. We'll have more coverage of this tomorrow on the program. Tune in at 6:05 right here at conduitnews.com, Facebook, YouTube, or your local terrestrial station. Just go to conduitnews.com to find out where you can listen on a radio station near you. Folks, that's all the time we have for this morning. Have a great day, Arkansas.